Alright guys, what you are now looking for is what's called Worksheet 15, where you guys are going to see a beautiful picture, or Master 15, of photosynthesis and cellular respiration. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of color this in so that it kind of brings together all the things now you've been doing with photosynthesis and cellular respiration. I really like this diagram because it does a nice job of kind of showing you how the whole processes work together in order to keep life functioning here on our planet. So what we're going to start off with is kind of the top, where you're going to see up here photosynthesis. So we're going to start up here because photosynthesis is where most of the energy originates from, as you guys are well aware. So we're going to start at the very top. So I'm going to use yellow, or you guys can use whatever you want, and I'm going to draw a nice little picture up here of this beautiful golden sun. And as you guys know, the sun is providing most of the energy. And what it's going to do is it's going to send down this tiny little photon of light that's going to interact with this organelle up here that you guys know as a chloroplast. And inside the chloroplast, there's this pigment. What's the pigment called? Chlorophyll. Excellent. And we learned a little bit about grana and these stroma and all these other kind of things. Well, all you have to really kind of remember for today is that in each of these different chloroplasts, these organelles, these stacks of grana and these thylakoids and all that kind of fun stuff, that in here we've got two reactions. We have the light dependent reaction, the one that requires the photon that came down from the sun, and the Calvin cycle, sometimes referred to as the dark cycle or the light independent reaction, because obviously it does not require any sunlight. So we start with the very first one. So if I go to the light dependent reaction, the product of this is going to be something called NADPH plus H, but it's also going to give off a waste product. And that waste product is going to be the oxygen that you and I breathe. So I'm coloring in mine in yellow because this is something that helps me remember that it's from the sun, it provides the energy. Now that I'm still in the chloroplasts, I'm going to look at the product of the light-dependent reaction, and I'm going to notice that in order for the Calvin cycle to work, as part of the process of photosynthesis taking place in the chloroplast, I'm going to need this substance right down here, carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide is obviously coming as part of the processes that go on down here in the mitochondria, which is going on inside of you and me and all that kind of fun stuff. So I take this carbon dioxide, and it's going to enter into the Calvin cycle. So I'm going to color this one in kind of dark, make it all pretty. I'm using black just because carbon, I think of carbon as black like charcoal. And it enters the Calvin cycle and goes through this whole long process. And once it goes through this whole process over and over and over again, eventually what the plant is trying to produce is its own food. And the food that you guys know that it's producing comes out in the end as that molecule that we think is oh so delicious and nutritious, glucose. So glucose is obviously the food source that we're all going to be talking about and using. Now, here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to take the glucose and we're going to take it and put it through a separate process in order to get the energy out of it. Now, what we have to also remember is that both plants and animals are going to go through this secondary process in order to get all of that ATP energy out of this. So we have to remember that plants make their own food. They make the glucose, but then they also go ahead and turn around and they also go through glycolysis and the mitochondria and this process of cellular respiration to produce their own extra energy to carry on their life processes. So make sure that you guys remember that as we kind of keep working our way through this. So go ahead, choose another color, whatever you guys want to use. I'm going to use red for my glucose. And I'm going to take that glucose and I'm going to enter it into the process of glycolysis. So go ahead, shade it in, make it look amazing. I know you're not all the greatest artists in the world, but that's all right. You'll survive. So now we've gone through this process. We've entered into glycolysis. At the end of glycolysis, we're going to produce 2 ATP molecules, which is great, a little bit of energy, and then we're going to create this pyruvic acid. And it's the pyruvic acid that we got through the breakdown of glucose that's now going to enter this second stage of cellular respiration, and it's going to go into the mitochondria. So I'm going to take my mitochondria, and I'm going to color this mitochondria in a slightly different color. What I want to color in for the mitochondria, oftentimes the represented is orange, so I'm going to use an orange for myself. You guys, again, can use any color that really makes you happy, but I'm going to use kind of orange to represent what's kind of going on in this mitochondria. All right, so we get this pyruvic acid. It enters in to this process. Through this process of the citric acid cycle, we're going to produce some carbon. Everybody loves carbon. So the carbon dioxide is what's going to be kind of coming out, which is then going to get used again by the plant through photosynthesis in the Calvin or the light independent reaction to produce that glucose. But I'm also going to get out of here something a little bit different. I'm going to enter now into something called the electron transport chain. And this electron transport chain is a very, very big deal, because this is where most of the energy ends up getting created. So this electron transport chain is going to produce lots and lots and lots of this special molecule down here, ATP. 36 total. Tons and tons of energy for me to carry on my cellular processes. But in order to do this, it needs one of those original waste products that we ended up getting from before. So that original waste product, I don't know if you guys remember, it was, that's right, oxygen. So the oxygen that I had up above is now going to be used down below, and it's going to oxidize this process to give me all this energy down here. And as a waste product, I'm actually going to get rid of something that my plants are going to need later on. And I'm coloring it in blue. And blue, for most of you guys, symbolizes water. So here's that water. And then that water gets transported back through the roots, typically, into the chloroplasts, through all those different parts of the leaf that you guys learned about earlier this week and over the weekend when you did your photosynthesis packet. And it gets used with a photon of light coming in here from the sun to go through the light-dependent reaction, reacting with that chlorophyll and all that kind of good stuff. And so now this diagram kind of brings together all the cool things that you guys now have been learning about the difference between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. And when you look at these two processes, this kind of now is that simple, elementary, 6th grade kind of process that you guys talked about, where you guys take some very, very simple things that you guys know about, things like carbon dioxide, and you bring that together with a little bit of water, and you combine that with some light energy, and that's going to get you guys that beautiful, magical molecule that you guys know as glucose. But you're also going to get some extra oxygen out of there. And so you get a little bit of the extra oxygen that you're going to end up needing later. And so now it all ends up in the right place. So as you guys can see, cellular respiration is going to be just the opposite of that. So you're going to get a little bit of that glucose that you guys are now going to combine with the oxygen. And what you're hopefully going to try and get out of there is you're going to try and get out of there some energy. And that energy is going to produce a byproduct of carbon dioxide and water, but in the end, you end up with lots and lots and lots of ATP energy. So this is the energy that's necessary for life, that ATP. So now that we understand our diagram, we've got it all colored in, it looks beautiful. I'm sure yours looks much better than mine at this point. We're going to use this information to answer the questions on the next page. So flip it over and let's look at these questions together and compare them to the diagram that we happen to make right here above us. All right, let's look at the first question. Question number 1. In what organelles do photosynthesis and cellular respiration take place? This is super, super easy. So photosynthesis obviously takes place in chloroplasts. And then obviously cellular respiration takes place in mitochondria. Beautiful. Trace the path of oxygen, water, carbon dioxide, glucose in the transparency. Well, we just kind of did that when we colored the whole thing in. So let's not worry about question number 2. I think we can kind of go on. We understand what kind of just happened. We looked at it. We colored it. It's beautiful. Now, question number 3. Which organelle requires sunlight to function? Well, you shouldn't have to really flip over to the back because you all should understand that sunlight is used in chloroplasts. And even my 7-year-old son can figure that one out for you guys. All right, now let's look at the next question. Number 4. In what ways are photosynthesis and cellular respiration alike? Well, if I go back and look at the diagram, you're going to notice that there's a lot of similarities between these two processes. One of the things that I've often noticed is that students sometimes will just look at the simple things that make up these processes. So I have carbon dioxide, I have water, I have glucose, and I have oxygen as part of photosynthesis. And if I go to the bottom, I still have that water, I still have carbon dioxide, I still have oxygen, I still have glucose. So that's one of the main similarities between these two processes. Another thing that students sometimes will notice is that if I look up here, as part of my light-dependent reaction, I did produce a small amount of ATP energy. Now, down here in cellular respiration, I had a huge amount of energy produced, 36 ATP molecules. But the reality is both processes did provide me with a little bit of energy in the form of ATP. Now, the last thing that I often see or students point out is that, kind of going back over to here, it's cellular respiration and photosynthesis. Both of these processes, photosynthesis as well as cellular respiration, both take place in cells, meaning that they are cellular processes. So that all of these things combined give me 3 things that I can write down to help explain in which ways photosynthesis and cellular respiration are alike. So let's put on here our 3 answers. So one of the bullets I can put on here is that they all contain, in some way, shape, or form, oxygen, carbon dioxide, water, and glucose. The other thing I can put on here is that both produce energy. Now remember that's in the form of ATP. And then lastly, I want to put on here that they all take place in a cell. Beautiful. Let's look at question 5. In what ways are photosynthesis and cellular respiration different? Well, when you go back and you look at the picture, it's pretty easy, I think, for most of us to kind of pick out the major differences between these two things. So photosynthesis, as you guys know, only takes place in chloroplasts. So it's only in plants, and in order to make it happen, you're going to need sunlight as well as water to make this occur, especially once you get over here. You're going to need to add a little bit of carbon dioxide too to get the carbon needed to produce glucose. Obviously, cellular respiration is going to be just the opposite of that process. So let's go down and let's write our answer down below. So I'll write in here in photosynthesis, you guys remember it takes place in a chloroplast. It's only in plants. And obviously, we need carbon dioxide, water, and some sunlight. Now for mitochondria, or cellular respiration, the important thing to remember about this is that it takes place in mitochondria. But the important thing, and this really, really is important, so put like 2 stars next to it, is this takes place in all cells. We're not just talking about plants, we're talking about all cells in here. Plants go through cellular respiration. I can't emphasize that enough for you guys, that all organisms are going to use some type of process like this in order to produce energy. So they need, just like you and I do, oxygen plus that glucose, C6H12O6. And that's why we see plants are autotrophs. They automatically make their own food so that they can then go ahead and use it through this process of cellular respiration. That is big, big, big for you guys to remember. Now let's look at the next question. What is the source of energy used by the mitochondria? Well, let's go back and look at our diagram for a second. If we go back and look at the diagram, we're going to notice that the glucose that was produced at the end of the Calvin cycle in the chloroplast gets converted through glycolysis into something called pyruvic acid, and that's what's going to enter into the mitochondria to go through the citric acid cycle that gives off that carbon dioxide, which will eventually enter the unbelievable electron transport chain. That's what's going to give off the water, but also use the oxygen that you and I are breathing right now, and then produce all of that energy down here. So to answer the question, we have glucose going through glycolysis into pyruvic acid. Let's go ahead and put that on our sheet. So I'm going to write on here glucose, which I know is getting converted eventually into pyruvic acid. Excellent. Now, which two cycles are linked by the production and utilization, in this case, of carbon dioxide? Where do these cycles occur? Well, again, let's go back and look at our diagram real fast. So I'm looking for carbon dioxide. I see that here's carbon dioxide. I see it up here. I see it being produced here. So which two cycles? Well, I can look down here and notice that the citric acid cycle is what is producing the carbon dioxide in the mitochondria that's then getting utilized by the Calvin cycle, or sometimes called the light independent reaction, or sometimes called the dark reaction, in the chloroplast, which eventually gives me my glucose. So those are the two things that I need to go back and write down. So here are my answers on here. So I have the citric acid cycle, which is obviously in the mitochondria. And obviously that's going to be linked to the Calvin cycle. Also known as the light independent reaction, which takes place in the chloroplasts. Now that's all pretty simple. So we get to finally to our very, very last question here for you guys. So when I get to the very last question, this is what you guys are going to see. Explain how the equations for photosynthesis and cellular respiration compare. Well, it's really kind of simple. When you look at both of those equations, when you compare them, you're going to see something that stands out to you guys. So let's look at them. So let me bring out my lightsaber. Beautiful. And when I look at these things, I have carbon dioxide combined with water, combined with light energy, produces glucose and oxygen. Now let's compare that to cellular respiration. So when I bring out my green lightsaber, I notice that I have my glucose, and I combine that with the oxygen that was given off from photosynthesis, and now I produce carbon dioxide as well as a little bit of water. So when you look at these two processes, what you should basically notice is that they are opposites of each other. And that is what we need to write down for the very last question, that they are opposites of one another. So as I write at the bottom, they are opposites. Now after going through this whole process, hopefully now you guys have a pretty good understanding of cellular respiration, photosynthesis, how they kind of work together, and hopefully this makes sense to you guys. So we're going to do one more thing before you guys head out as class today, and we are going to look at one of the things that requires lots and lots of energy, and that is reproduction. Now we're going to look at it a slightly different way than what you guys might be thinking, but nonetheless we'll get there eventually. So go ahead, put your colored pencils away, and here's what we're going to do now. We're going to start, or not really start, but we're going to kind of get into a slightly different topic. And what we're going to be looking at is something called asexual reproduction. One of the things that most organisms need energy for is to reproduce. And so what we're going to look at is one of the processes that organisms use to reproduce asexually. And so what we're going to kind of do is I'm going to have you guys watch a different video, and you are going to follow the directions that he has provided for you in his video. The good thing about this video is that he kind of gives you some very, very short notes, and then what you end up doing is you see a bunch of different little vignettes or videos that kind of give some real world examples. So you're going to need a sheet of either computer paper or a loose leaf lined paper for you to kind of take notes on this last little bit of information. The video is only about 13 minutes long, but you kind of are at the freedom for yourself to take your own kind of notes, whatever you think works best for you guys. Well, thank you very much, guys. It's been fun doing this video. We might do more of them in the future. You never know. If I can never get out of Buffalo again, we might do this for the rest of the year. All right, guys. Have a great afternoon and enjoy your weekend. Remember, your homework for tonight is to make sure that you guys do weekly science article number 10. That's weekly science article number 10. And that's the only homework assignment that I'm going to be giving you guys this weekend. So enjoy the next couple days. Hopefully I will dig myself out of here and get in there to see you guys in a little bit. And hopefully Monday will be a great day. We only have 2 days next week, which will be awesome. Take it easy, my friends, and drive safely out there, all of you. Especially you, Bower Sox.